what's going on? I'm Ty. So, Microsoft officially owns Bethesda, and that got me kind of thinking about how they mentioned exclusivity. So, for anyone not in the know, apparently some Bethesda games going forward will be exclusive to Xbox and PC, though they did use the phrasing of wherever Game Pass is available. So, let's get into it and discuss this and unpack it while we head down the warp pipe. Alright, I'm going to start this off with a caveat and a basic explanation. I really believe that every game should be everywhere for anyone to be able to play whenever they want. It's kind of the go-to for all medium as far as I'm concerned. So whether it's movies, music, or the aforementioned games, I think everyone should be able to experience every piece of content if they so choose. I completely understand that's not a realistic expectation or even a realistic thing that can happen. The reality of the situation is old console hardware and even old PC hardware was different from each other. So whether it was a Windows or Linux system versus a Mac, back in the day, they used different architecture. Kind of seems like we might be getting back to that now with what Apple wants to do, but that's not here or there. And specifically on the old consoles, the big ones that stand out to me personally, because it was kind of the first consoles I personally owned, are the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, but I know it goes further back from there where the actual hardware inside of the systems is vastly different, and you can't make the same game for the same system the same way. That's obviously not the reality these days. All of the consoles are some version of either a PC or a phone, and the same engines work across all of the systems. So one of the big things against exclusivity is that obviously not everyone can afford every system and every piece of hardware. However, there's a lot of things that can come from exclusivity, such as the big one that jumps to my mind is Aladdin on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. They were actually completely different games developed by completely different developers, which a lot of times back then, because of the policies that Nintendo required a game to be exclusive for X amount of months or years. I don't know the exact specifics, I'm not going to pretend to, but I know that that was the case. And so you had a lot of development where two different developers developed two different games under the same name for the two different systems so that they could release at the same time. Nowadays though, exclusivity, and even back then, was really about giving you a reason to own that piece of plastic and that circuitry. So whether it's Halo being exclusive to Xbox, which weirdly enough was originally supposed to be a PC and Mac game, and was actually shown off first at Macworld, weirdly enough. But once Microsoft bought them, that became an Xbox property. And then you have obviously Sony with Uncharted, God of War, a whole slew. Very similar to Nintendo with Mario, Zelda, and Metroid. Those are kind of their top three, I would say. Even though I love Donkey Kong Country, which is also exclusive. But the whole point of these franchises and games is to give you a reason to own that company's hardware. Sega, you can see, back in the day, used to do that as well with the Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Altered Beast, Jet Set Radio, and a whole bunch of other great games that now either are kind of lost to history, or in the case of a lot of them, such as like Bayonetta, for example, are actually on multiple systems, at least for the first Bayonetta. I know the later ones became Nintendo exclusive, but that's really a big thing, is that they managed to put everything kind of everywhere else because they no longer were able to get people to buy a piece of hardware for their games. And while the quality is maybe questionable over the years, there's definitely been some massive hits that they've released, like the Yakuza series, for example, which is everywhere now. It is on Xbox and on the PlayStation. Obviously, it's not on the Switch, but it'd be pretty cool if it did. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of games start out as an exclusive and eventually go on to other platforms, either a few months or a few years down the line. Mega Man's a great example of this from back in the day, or even something like Devil May Cry, where it was originally a PlayStation exclusive, and now the newer titles, as well as the older ones, are available on a lot of different platforms and systems. So there's a couple different other reasons, like funding, that can factor into this. So if an indie developer is making a game, obviously PC is the easy platform to throw it onto. But if Xbox or Sony or Nintendo are willing to either fund a bit or help them out, get those games onto their systems, you're going to see it be exclusive to that platform, at least for a certain period of time. Fall Guys is a great example of this in terms of something more recent, where it was console exclusive to PlayStation and now it's coming out on the other platforms. Well, soon, hopefully. Could get a delay. And the real reality behind this is that when you're developing for different systems, you have to actually spend more time and therefore more money to get things to run properly on those systems. Even though the PS5, the PS4, the Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X and S all were and are just basically PC hardware, there's still little nuances that you need to balance for. And on PC, that's kind of left up to the end consumer, where you can adjust the sliders and adjust the resolution and everything like that, versus console, where things have to be a lot more plug and play. So you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time and energy on the development side. So that's another reason where you can run into some issues getting games multi-platform, especially if something like Final Fantasy, for example, most of your player base at this point is going to be playing on PlayStation. That's just kind of the reality. So for me, I actually love a lot of exclusive games. Most of my favorite games over the years either started out as exclusive or are still exclusive to this day. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat with that. Obviously, you can get Donkey Kong Country on a bunch of different Nintendo hardware, but you still need a piece of Nintendo hardware to play it. So I thought it'd be a really fun and interesting thing to look at. So let's go through together with IGN's top 100 games of all time list and see just how many of them were exclusive, at least at launch. So there's a couple different rules for this. One, it has to be exclusive either to PC or console, but if it's exclusive to one console and PC, we're still gonna count that. The other thing here is that exclusivity needs to be for at least a couple of months. It can't be just 1 or 2 months, but something like a year totally qualifies. The other thing that we have to keep in mind here is that as we're going through, let's try and count how many games were exclusive and see if you can guess the number of games that are actually exclusive on this list. So let's go through, quick look and glance, and I'll be right back. So by my count here, and I'm pretty sure it's accurate because I went through with a fine-tooth comb, there's 75 games that were or currently still are exclusive to one platform or at least one family of platforms. So that's completely nuts to me. Basically, 3/4 of the best games of all time, at least by IGN, which obviously everyone's is going to fluctuate because I don't agree with their entire list, that is exclusive or was exclusive, and it's completely crazy. So for me, like I said, most of my favorite games tend to be exclusives. I'm not saying there isn't some. Obviously, I love games like Portal 2, Titanfall 2, and a whole slew. I've been loving the Avengers game recently, which I know, it's getting an update. There's a whole bunch of controversy around it, but for me, it's still a fun grind. Anyways, let me know some of your favorite games down below and what your guess was for that list of top 100 games on IGN. What did you think that the number of exclusives were? Anyways, I'll see you guys next Games Tuesday.